Hannah Myers thought she had married the perfect man, Daniel Myers, a quiet, dependable husband who brought her coffee every morning and kissed her good night without fail. But beneath Daniel's calm exterior was a terrifying secret. He was a cold-blooded serial killer, and Hannah had been living just inches above his hidden world of horror. Hannah Myers always believed she had been blessed with a life that others only dreamed of. Her mornings began with fresh coffee on the porch of her charming white, painted home in a quiet Milwaukee suburb. Birds chirped in the trees lining the street, and the neighbors often waved good morning as they passed by. Her job as a preschool teacher brought her joy and meaning. She was passionate, nurturing, and beloved by children and parents alike. Her friends often joked that she had stepped straight out of a lifestyle magazine. But what brought her the most happiness was her husband, Daniel. Daniel Myers was the kind of man who turned heads in the most respectful way. He wasn't flashy, but he had a presence. He worked as a systems analyst at a tech company downtown, known for his intelligence, quiet nature, and steady job. To Hannah, he was the rock she had always prayed for, thoughtful, gentle, and always one step ahead when it came to making her feel cared for. He left little love notes for her in the kitchen, always made time for her even after long workdays, and on weekends he cooked breakfast while she played soft music in the background. It all felt like a movie. They had met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, where he stood out, not because he was loud or overly charming, but because of how attentive he was. He listened deeply, asked thoughtful questions, and never made the conversation about himself. For Hannah, who had dated a series of immature and unreliable men in her 20s, Daniel seemed like a dream come true. They dated for 2 years before getting married in a beautiful fall ceremony. From that moment on, life seemed to click into place. Marriage suited them, or so she thought. Their life followed a comforting rhythm. Mondays were for grocery runs, Wednesdays were pasta nights, and Sundays were reserved for movie marathons with their golden retriever, Max, curled up between them on the couch. Hannah loved how safe she felt, how ordinary their life was in the best way. Even their arguments were mild, usually over laundry or which route to take during road trips. He never raised his voice, never slammed a door, never made her feel scared. That kind of control and calmness seemed rare in a man. Her friends envied her, and her parents frequently told her how lucky she was. Looking back, Hannah would replay every memory, every smile, every tender moment, searching for clues she might have missed. But in the early years there had been no red flags, no strange phone calls, no lies that stood out. Daniel never disappeared for long periods, never acted possessive or jealous. He was predictable in the way stable partners are, reliable to a fault. She trusted him with every part of herself. She gave him her love, her loyalty, and her blind faith. And that, she would later realize, is what made it so easy for the monster to stay hidden. It started with little things, subtle changes that Hannah almost didn't notice at first. Daniel, once eager to spend every evening together, began spending more and more time alone. He claimed he was working on a special freelance project for extra income. He told her it involved highly sensitive data and that he needed absolute privacy. At first, Hannah admired his dedication. She brought him snacks at the door and offered to help, but he always declined politely. Then he installed a heavy, duty lock on the basement door. He said it was to secure his equipment. She believed him. At night, she would sometimes hear soft, mechanical noises below the floorboards. Low hums, occasional clanks, and strange buzzing sounds that didn't match the rhythm of any home appliance. When she asked, Daniel brushed it off, claiming the furnace was old or that a tool had dropped. He always had an answer. She tried not to overthink it. After all, every home has its quirks. Then came the odors. Once or twice a week, a faint metallic scent drifted through the vents. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was there. Hannah tried cleaning the drains, airing out the rooms, even lighting candles, but nothing made it go away entirely. Daniel noticed her concern and said he had spilled cleaning chemicals in the basement. He promised to handle it. Over time, other oddities began to build. Max, the golden retriever who had always adored Daniel, grew tense around him. The dog would stiffen when Daniel walked into a room and refused to go near the basement door. It was subtle, but dogs don't lie. Hannah mentioned it once, half jokingly, but Daniel seemed oddly defensive. He claimed Max was getting old and cranky. One day while cleaning, Hannah stumbled across a small key tucked behind the coffee jar in the kitchen. It didn't match any of the doors in the house that she knew of. She considered asking Daniel about it, but something held her back. She felt a strange sense of intrusion, as though even touching it had crossed a line. She quietly slipped it into a drawer and said nothing. A week later, a bill arrived in the mail addressed to Daniel, rent for a storage unit in a neighboring town. It struck her as strange. She'd never heard him mention a storage unit before. When she asked, he said it was for storing old computers and monitors he planned to refurbish and resell. His tone was calm, his expression unchanged, but something in his eyes felt colder than before. The warmth she was used to had been replaced with a hollow distance. Still, she pushed the thought away. Marriage had its secrets, didn't it? People needed space, privacy. She told herself that if something was truly wrong, there would be clearer signs. Real danger would be obvious, but sometimes the most terrifying truths are wrapped in ordinary explanations, and the danger doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it waits in silence, behind a locked door, under your own roof, hiding in the shadows you choose not to question. The first body was found by accident. 2 hikers were wandering through the woods near Lake Pike, a popular trail not far from Hannah and Daniel's neighborhood. The leaves were starting to fall, and a sharp autumn breeze carried the smell of damp soil and decaying foliage. One of the hikers noticed something sticking out from the ground, what looked like a piece of plastic tarp tangled in roots. Curious and slightly uneasy, they dug gently with a stick, only to uncover what appeared to be a human foot. The police cordoned off the area within hours, and what they unearthed sent shockwaves through the local community. Buried just beneath the surface was the body of Madison Lowe, a 17-year-old girl who had gone missing 6 months earlier. She had vanished one afternoon on her walk home from school. At the time, it was assumed she had run away. Her home life had been strained, and there were rumors of a boyfriend she had met online. The case had slowly faded from public attention, until now. Detectives knew immediately this was not a simple case of a runaway meeting a tragic end. The body had been wrapped in layers of plastic and bound with industrial-grade zip ties. There were markings on the tarp, unusual knots, and signs that the grave had been carefully, deliberately constructed. This wasn't panic, it was a pattern. Over the next few weeks, more remains were found. 2 more young women, both missing within the past year, were discovered in different wooded areas. The burial styles were almost identical: shallow graves, plastic wrapping, and the same type of zip ties used to bind the bodies. It became clear to investigators that they were dealing with a serial offender. Someone organized, someone who knew how to hide in plain sight. The FBI was called in to assist with profiling. Forensic experts examined the materials and traced the specific kind of zip ties to a rare supplier used by only a handful of companies in the area. It was an unexpected break in the case. Investigators compiled a list of employees who had access to such materials. One name on that list stood out: Daniel Myers. His name didn't ring any alarm bells at first. No criminal history, a stable job, and a quiet home life. But when detectives ran deeper checks, they found something unusual. Daniel had rented not 1, but 3 storage units in different parts of the city under slightly altered versions of his name. And when they reviewed surveillance footage from the storage facilities, there he was entering late at night, always alone, always careful. Still, the evidence wasn't enough for an arrest. Investigators needed something concrete. A search warrant was filed and approved, aimed at uncovering more. Daniel had no idea the noose was tightening around him. He continued his routine, went to work, smiled at neighbors, and came home to his unsuspecting wife, who had no clue that she was sharing a bed with the very man responsible for the horrors unfolding in their town. What lay beneath their own home, however, would soon make everything undeniable. The search warrant was executed early on a gray Wednesday morning. Rain drizzled lightly as unmarked police vehicles lined up outside Hannah and Daniel's house. Daniel had already left for work, and Hannah was getting ready for her day when the knock came at the door. She opened it to find a group of serious-faced officers holding paperwork and asking to search her home. Confused, she allowed them in, heart pounding with anxiety. She had no idea that the next few hours would unravel everything she thought she knew about her life. The officers moved with precision. Some began inspecting the main living areas while others headed straight for the basement door, the one Daniel always kept locked. They presented Hannah with a secondary warrant specific to the basement, which she reluctantly acknowledged. When they broke the lock and stepped into the dimly lit space below, even the most seasoned detectives weren't prepared for what they found. The basement had been completely transformed. Walls were covered in thick plastic sheeting, industrial lights hung from the ceiling, and in the center of the room stood a stainless deal table stained with dark blotches. Metal shelves were lined with labeled boxes, and in the far corner, several large plastic bins were stacked tightly against the wall. What was most disturbing, however, was the collection of old VHS tapes stored neatly in rows. Each tape had a name written on the spine in black marker, names that matched those of the missing girls. Investigators found a series of surveillance monitors connected to hidden cameras placed in various rooms of the house. Hannah had been watched, constantly, unknowingly. Footage revealed her doing everyday tasks, cooking dinner, folding laundry, sleeping. Her entire life had been observed through a lens. Police also discovered a hidden drawer inside a workbench containing several personal items. Mall earrings, a hairbrush, a bracelet, all confirmed to belong to the victims. Some of these women had been declared missing for months, their cases cold and stagnant. Now the truth was pouring out like a dam that had finally cracked. The most chilling discovery was a journal Daniel had kept, detailing his thoughts and methods. Written in neat, careful handwriting, it laid out how he chose his victims, how he lured them, and how he meticulously cleaned up afterward. He spoke of his ability to hide, to live a dual life, and how no one, especially not Hannah, would ever suspect the truth. He described his wife as the perfect cover, someone so innocent and trusting that she unknowingly gave him the shield he needed. When Hannah was shown the contents of the basement, she collapsed, her legs gave out beneath her, and she was taken to the hospital in a state of emotional shock. Her mind could not process that the man who kissed her goodbye that morning, who held her hand at night, had been living this secret life of horror beneath their home. News of the basement discovery made headlines instantly. Friends, neighbors, and coworkers were stunned. Nobody could believe that Daniel Myers, quiet, intelligent, polite Daniel, was the man behind a string of gruesome murders. But the truth had been buried under layers of normalcy, hidden in plain sight, behind a locked door that no one thought to question until it was far too late. Daniel was arrested quietly at his workplace later that afternoon. He didn't resist, didn't ask why, and showed no emotion as he was handcuffed and escorted out in front of stunned coworkers. His desk was neatly organized, his computer still open, his lunch untouched. To those who had worked beside him for years, he was just a mild-mannered analyst, a man who rarely raised his voice or participated in office gossip. No one imagined he could be capable of something so horrific. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. The trial that followed became one of the most widely covered cases in the state's history. People were captivated by the contrast between Daniel's public persona and the monstrous reality uncovered in his basement. Forensic evidence linked him directly to 5 murders. Each of the victims' DNA was found in the basement, on the tools, on the table, and on the zip ties. The VHS tapes held hours of disturbing footage that confirmed the timeline and methods of his crimes. The journal was treated as a confession in writing. He refused to testify in his own defense. He sat stone-faced throughout the proceedings, never once looking at the victims' families or at Hannah, who attended every session with a distant, hollow expression. Her life had shattered, yet she forced herself to face the courtroom, to see the man she had once loved turned into someone unrecognizable. At one point during the trial, a prosecutor read aloud a passage from Daniel's journal in which he described the thrill of being unseen, how hiding in plain sight gave him power, and how no one ever questioned a man with a wedding ring and a steady job. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours before returning with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. Daniel Myers was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read, offering only a slight tilt of his head, as if acknowledging an inevitable conclusion. After the trial, Hannah disappeared from the public eye. She sold the house and left the state, changing her name and cutting contact with many who knew her. The weight of her unintentional proximity to evil haunted her. For years she had unknowingly lived above a hidden world of violence and cruelty, smiling at dinner while horrors brewed beneath her feet. No amount of therapy or time could fully erase the scars. The neighborhood, once known for its peace and charm, never quite recovered either. The house remained empty for months before it was quietly demolished. The lot was eventually turned into a small memorial garden in honor of the victims, a silent reminder that darkness can take root in even the most ordinary places. Hannah now speaks anonymously to groups and support networks, urging others to trust their instincts, to ask the hard questions, and to never assume that love is proof of safety. She learned the truth in the hardest way possible. The most dangerous monsters are not the ones hiding in the woods or lurking in the dark. Sometimes they live right beside you, smiling, quiet, and waiting.